Well, welcome everybody. Glad you could make it. Just to, I think everybody knows, we've got two refiners peer groups, and we have a mix of people from both of those here on the on this. So really glad that all of you could make it. Really excited to have Dan on this. Dan is a really unique individual. And when Dan and I first started talking, I think the thing that amazed me most about him was, I don't know how long we'd been talking, and then all of a sudden, he said, somehow he said that he's 70 years old, and I just kind of stopped and I went, wait, you're 70? Because he didn't sound like he was 70. He sounded really young. And I appreciated that. You remember that, Dan? You might remember me saying that, and just how great I thought that was, that 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 you're so vibrant, right? And I just really love that. But the thing that really impresses me about Dan is just how much he doesn't quit, and how much hope he can give us. I'll let him tell his story and talk, and I know we're going to have this more really interactive. So anybody who has a question, you ask your question, and don't hesitate to just jump right in. But what I know about him is, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, when during the .com bomb blow up, he lost, I think, pretty much everything, and it ended up homeless for a while there, and ultimately recovered from that, and got back on his feet. But then I believe when he was 62 years old, he had open heart surgery. I thought it was 42. That's what I've been telling everybody. But today he informed me that I was a liar, or uninformed. I'm going to go with that one. But then he recovered from that, and then he is a nationally ranked track field in his age group, and he can fill us in on all the blanks. But probably the coolest thing out of everything is, at 70 years old, he just got his degree. So he hasn't stopped. So Dan has a lot of hope for all of us, and anybody who takes the route of just getting too old for that, we can turn to Dan. And Dan, with that, you want to? I'll hand the baton to you. I don't know if that's your thing, but there you go.
Thank you, Tab. Thank you. We talked a little earlier, and the format is, I've got 257 slides, so I'll share screens, and we'll all be old by the time this is over. Actually, we're going to keep it. I like the term town hall meeting. Maybe that has some different connotations for different people, but just informal and loose. And I'll talk enough, hopefully, to just queue up some questions. And I'm interested in your organization and you personally. And if we can leave this session and I can inspire one person, it's my goal, just one person that might have a different, that may shift from the way they're thinking now, and under the brand of New Heart for Life, maybe have this be a seminal moment, if you will. I'm going to turn my iPhone off. I'm just getting some background noise. So if we can make it a seminal moment where there's one person that's affected, then success. So with that said, law of threes. So I'll Tab touched on them, but let's maybe go about with the theme is, it's never too late to change. And that we all undergo adversity. So I don't consider myself terminally unique in terms of undergoing adversity. I just have three different types of stories. And what is maybe the theme is process that I went through or that I was dragged through many times that allowed me to come out on the other end and have faith that the next adversity that I happen to face, or that any of us happen to face, that there is a way out and there is a process out. Because although the three stories are very, they're very not similar, the themes are pretty consistent. So Tab talked about the .com bust, so or implosion, but that story, and for those that have been around or experienced it themselves, was one where Washington D.C. area it's really pretty much a Silicon Valley of the East, where we had a lot of telecommunications companies. I was calling on companies like AOL before they were named AOL. They're called Quantum Computer Services, and it was a wild ride. But like anything else in life, you really don't know it until you look back and get a perspective. But if looking back at those times, we didn't know quite the world we were in. But it was an absolutely fascinating time, and I rode that wave all the way up, and like a tsunami, rode it down when it crashed in 2000. And the story behind that is I never looked for a job. I was always fortunate to be to know people, and we networked together and stayed within the same family. I'm getting some background noise, Tab. I'm not sure who that might be, or at least through here. Everybody on mute?
Hold on. I'm going to go on mute.
Okay.
It might be me.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So anyhow, in the year 2000, it was like, I have a saying, like there's three types of people, right? There's people that watch it happen, there's people that make it happen, and there's people that sit back and go, what happened? And I was one of those people that said, what happened? And it was not only the .com bust, but being in the telecom industry, it was really at the center of the storm. Because of all the infrastructure and all the spending that was invested on the concept to build it and they will come. My buddies and friends either had made their millions of dollars, or they were real estate agents or mortgage brokers. And I remember saying to them, hey, go get a big job and come get me, will you? I mean, I'm out here on an island, and this thing is, they said, hey, get a life, Danny. I'm out of a job too. So we were all very, very much affected. And like anything else, the normal cycle of denial, and then anger, and then exploration, and then acceptance, those phases started to happen. And I hit an emotional, physical, financial, and spiritual bottom. Because when you're that invigorated and that engrossed in anything, and it's taken away, you don't realize, or I certainly didn't realize, how much stimulus and how much energy that provided me on a daily and hourly basis. So I was in a really tough void. And as I started to slide down, I didn't find a job. This was in the year 2000 to 2003. I started losing it all, as Tab alluded to, and was living at my sister's, and just got to a very, very low place where I didn't even have the confidence that I could get back into the game. So that was, the .com story. The New Heart for Life story was that I did have heart issues. I think it's somewhat genetic in the family. There's three factors to heart situations, and you know, just by law of numbers, the people that are on this call, if not yourself, you've known somebody that has experienced stroke or heart disease, because it's the #1 killer in the United States for women and men. And so there was touches of, I had a stent back earlier in the year 2003, probably not unrelated to my story that I just shared, because stress is one of the big factors in heart disease. You know, there's, you know, the dietary, obviously the exercise, and then, you know, stress is probably, as the cardiologist told me, about 60% of it. So if your stress levels are high, be on alert, because there are actually chemicals that are expelled into our blood system that clog the arteries. So I was going through a lot of issues again back in 2000 and, oh gosh, this was 2012, where now I had regained myself back in the telecom industry. Oh, by the way, especially for this group, in between, after 2003, I never did find a job in the telecom world or any world. So I was doing so much networking, I started a company called the Networking Community. And I would host events. And so I have a very much an affection for your types of groups that bond together and get to know each other and build relationships. And then minimally business will come out of it. But if not, there's so many rewards. So I started the Networking Community. And it's actually kind of an important piece of the puzzle, from 2003 to 2009. And hosted events, and my whole philosophy is, you know, as yours is build relationships, you know, referrals will follow. And that the law of reciprocity, and that I had a set of values that I just believed in my entire life. And I took those into the networking community groups, and wrote newsletters once a week called Tales from the Networking Community. And like Tab, who really didn't envision writing a book, I had no visions of writing a book, but one of a publisher in California picked it up. He was one of my subscribers, and we put together, you know, he asked me if I would like to take those, you know, the best of all the tales. And so that's a book called Tales from the Networking Community. First chapter is From Desperation to Discovery. Subtitle is Networking Like Life is a Process, Not an Event. So that kept me afloat up till 2009. And then, hey, we had another crash upon us, right? With the whole real estate market. And I had the model up and working, and it was a business model, but there was one problem with the business. And I call it a banana peel syndrome. And that is, if I slipped on a banana peel, there was no company. You know, I had the groups going, plate spinning, but it really was a business model that was not sustainable without additional cash and investors, which I could have attracted, but at that time everybody was pulling back. So, so I got back into the telecom business and went back into leadership positions, and by the grace of God, was able to reconnect with now the telecom era of 2010, and went right back onto the gerbil wheel, right? Back to the stress, back to the, you know, not eating well, not exercising. And so in 2012, I had a very, very serious, I had a heart attack that they quoted that wasn't that serious. So I waited a week to be admitted to the Washington, I was in Martinsburg, West Virginia at the time, at that VA hospital. And then I went to the DC hospital, where they do all the heart procedures, and they have the cardiac ICU unit and the heart surgeons. And I went in for a stent. So just raise your hand. Everybody know what a stent procedure is? Just kind of raise their hands. You know, they put up, you know, it's non-invasive to a degree, where they put a kind of a mesh tube, you know, in the artery that's most clogged, blocked. And so I went in for a stent procedure expecting to walk out that afternoon at the VA hospital. And during the procedure, I mean, there's no procedure that you do in a hospital that's normal, but I expected to walk out as an outpatient. But during that procedure, I had multiple heart attacks. I had been on blood thinners the previous week. And I had pneumonia going in. And during that operation, several heart attacks happened. The cardiologist did one of these, Houston, we have a problem. So he called up to the lead heart surgeon and said, Amy, I obviously was unconscious, but everything went wrong. And the heart surgeon at the time was teaching a class. So he comes down and they ballooned me up for the night, you know, just to keep me alive. And I had a 9-hour operation the next day. And the next thing I remember before going into that stent procedure was I woke up with my wrist tied to the bed rails. I was intubated, could not speak, obviously. And I had no clue what had happened, where I was. There was a lot of people around my bedside. And I later discovered that because they couldn't stop the bleeding because of blood thinners, that they couldn't close me up. So I was in a 5-day coma. And my daughters, I have four beautiful daughters, and the family, you know, friends, you know, everybody who obviously was concerned and very frightful as I was in the coma. And my daughters conferred with the doctor, and the doctor shared that he never operates on one of any 3 conditions. Anybody that's had heart attacks, anybody on blood thinners, or anybody with pneumonia. They try to prevent pneumonia when you go into the hospital. And what happened was, he says, I never operated on any one of those 3 conditions. And so my oldest daughter, Jackie, said, well, Dr. Alexander, why did you go through this operation? And he said, I had no choice. Your dad was going to die. And so through the courageous efforts of a heart surgeon that didn't need to take that risk, and the grace of God, prayers from family, I was able to walk out of that hospital a month later. And the second part of the heart story is that I didn't break the code right away. I started to slip back into my old habits. And about 1.5 years later, you know, I was feeling lethargic, I was feeling bloated. And then an inner voice literally came to me and said, Danny, what are you doing? You are in extra innings with a gift that's been so freely given. You're not going to make it the second time. And it was that inner voice that propelled me into the master's, to rekindle with my love of sports and running. And I was fortunate to find a master's track team. And that has led me through the camaraderie of my teammates, through my coach, through some God-given talents, and just perseverance of never, ever wanting to go back to where I just shared. It's allowed me to opened up doors and allowed me to have experiences and meet people that I never dreamed possible. I'm nationally ranked. We talk about the age. This is why I always keep on correcting tab on my age, you know, because with Masters Track, we are in 5-year increments, right? So I'm in the 70 to 74 group, and I couldn't wait till I turned 70 because, you know, now I'm, you know, you would think, you know, more competitive because but believe me, every age group in Masters, when you're at that level, running track and field, they're all, it's a very humbling experience, you know, when you start to get around true athletes and how they've carried on for all the years. So I can't wait till 75 is my next bracket. At any rate, so I have been ranked nationally. I've been awarded by the United States Track and Field Association All-American status. I'm very, very competitive regionally. On this coming month, we were due to be in Toronto, as everything's been canceled for the International Masters Track event. I'm wearing my veteran fatigues here, or camouflage, I should say, in honor of, we're going to be, this week was the National Veterans Games and to be held in Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin. And so obviously that's all off the tables, but I'm wearing my camouflage in memory of that. So it's been a journey. And, you know, the last part of it, you know, and then we'll open it up for conversations or kind of like, well, whatever I can help you out with, is in 1969, I started at the University of Maryland. And after 8 years of parochial school, I went to a military high school that my dad, and it was a family tradition like that song. I don't know who sings it. Maybe one of you help me out. You know, it's a family tradition. So I went to St. John's, which is a military high school. So I had 4 years of military, Christian brothers. And then they put me out of the University of Maryland, and I was like in Disneyland, absolutely lost. And so I didn't fare too well. It was the first year of the lottery in 1970. And so I found myself in Vietnam. And my mother always wanted me to finish my degree. And it was always kind of in the back of my mind. And I was very embarrassed, although I did very well business-wise, but only because I was at sales leadership positions and high tech, hello. So I didn't necessarily need a degree to advance and to thrive. But it's like that voice inside that it just always bothered me. So last month, I graduated with honors from the University of Phoenix, and Larry Fitzgerald from the Arizona Cardinals, who I just admire, I always have. He was our keynote speaker. So it was, you know, it was just, you know, another story of it's never, ever too late, you know, to give up on your dreams, no matter how long they took. That journey was 50 years until I achieved my degree, but it is possible. So whether it be employment, and certainly we're all experiencing, you know, some sort of employment downs, you know, I can't think, you know, unemployment, just, you know, not just the financial that comes with that, but just the spiritual and the emotional and what we get out of our work and thriving. So from a standpoint of our work, from a standpoint of our health, and from a perspective of the college degree, I branded New Heart for Life. And my passion now is just to pay it forward, to tell my story. And based on the audience, it might just be about the heart, who knows, but to tell my story so that someone can be inspired and that can take my journey, and hopefully it may spark them to change their life. And that's why I believe I'm here. That's why I believe there's no coincidence with Tab and I meeting. And that's why I'm so grateful to be able to speak this afternoon, and hopefully to leave you with some encouragement, no matter how dire your situation may be. With that, I'll turn it back over to Tab and take, you know, let's just talk about life and what's going on in your lives and any questions you may have.
So the first question I have for Dan, phenomenal. I love the story, and I love everything you do. And I love your youthfulness. You know, you need to start acting your age. Because I'm always so impressed The first question I have for everybody is, does anybody know that song that he's talking about?
No.
Trivia question. It's a family tradition. It's about whiskey and drinking. It's not about working out.
It was Sly and the Family Stone, A Family Affair.
Okay.
Was that it? Come on, man, give me something.
I was thinking of the country and western singer. It wasn't Waylon Jennings. I'll think of it for the call's over.
All right,
Actually,
well, I'm going with
yeah.
Sly and the Family Stone, A Family Affair. We're done. Okay. Does anybody have any? I have some questions, but does anybody have any questions that they want to ask? I don't know if anybody is looking to unmute or not, but the thing that gets me, Dan, is, you know, there's every one of us has something that we should be doing that we're not doing. We just, you know, we just, for whatever reason, choose to ignore it for a bit. Stephen Covey talked about it as, you know, some balls that you juggle are glass and some are rubber and they bounce. And, you know, then after a while, those that are rubber and bounce no longer bounce. But we all have something that we should be doing that we're not doing. What advice do you have for people that just aren't doing what they should be doing, or haven't made the plunge into doing it?
Yeah, so, and I think there's a lot of us in that situation right now where we're forced to kind of self-motivate ourselves. So it's more important today than it was forever. I lean back on the acronym or the word ACT, and the acronym is Action Changes Things. I talk about baby steps. In the ICU unit at the hospital, my first goal was to make it to the end of the ICU unit. It was Christmas time, so there's an artificial Christmas tree. And to get to that tree and back was my ultimate goal for that day, that week. So I think for those that are, you know, and I speak to this a lot, that we have a comfort zone and our minds naturally resist change and we resist action, especially something, you know, that is profound and significant. So for those people, I'd say, one, find a passion, find something that inspires you. But even if not, just the smallest step will start the wheel moving. And don't discount how insignificant that first step is, whatever it may be in your lives. I'll kind of just close that topic or that thought with, you know, the mind is a very, very powerful instrument, right? It can work for us and against us. And the reason baby steps are so important is because we really trick the mind. Because when the mind senses something that is not a big challenge, then it's almost lets its defenses down and the resistance is reduced. So when we put up projects for ourselves that are just like too big, the mind goes, you'll never be able to do that. That'll never happen. You're a failure, you know, and the committee. Can anybody relate to this? I don't know. The committee starts to talk, right? And so, you know, the trick is to get out of that, you know, to get moving, start with baby steps, and then momentum will start to build, and you almost kind of like, you trick your mind into to not putting its defenses up.
AJ, did your hand go up?
Yes. Hello, Dan. Thanks for sharing your time with us. I was very curious about your networking project. You said that you were doing telecom stuff and then life crashed and then you started building a networking business. About that time, if I remember correctly, GeoCities was building online communities. Others wanted to get into the game. Why did he just focus on the event side and not just raise a little bit of capital and go build, you know, more communities online?
Yeah, great question. Well, in 2003, um, the concept of online wasn't as forefront. When did GeoCities, did you say?
Yeah, GeoCities was right there in 2000-ish. I was in their offices in Santa Monica, 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
And they were trying to beat off the investors. People were giving them tens of millions of dollars.
Mhm.
Right? And I remember their office. I was at Microsoft at the time, and we were thinking of a strategic stake or partnership. And they had beautiful offices, Santa Monica, Ocean View, this, that, a handful of employees, but they were doing really, really well. And then I think Yahoo bought them,
Mhm.
right? And to
Yeah.
me, they were a little ahead of their time. I mean, online communities are really powerful today, way more powerful than they were 15, 20 years ago. But nonetheless, same thing. I mean, this is a scenario where, um, again, but it does take capital. And you were very well connected. I was just curious why you didn't just go raise a little bit of money and build it out.
Yeah. Well, at the time, a question, it makes me reflect. At the time, well, I wasn't smart enough. I didn't have smart people around me. I just knew I needed to do something to generate some cash, and I'd done so much networking, like face to face, that I saw, well, maybe there's a need for an umbrella group, because we had all these different groups and they all had their cultures, as I'm sure you have yours, and rightfully so. So I saw that there was a need for an umbrella organization, and it was just to survive with, putting on events and getting sponsors. And looking back, I didn't have the I didn't have the time or the money just to kind of to take my time in a discovery mode, and because even later than that, I certainly could have monetized it because it was a proven business model and taken it to the online side. um, but looking back, hindsight's 2020. I just didn't. I was just kind of in survival mode, trying to figure out how to make some immediate dollars, and didn't have that much forethought.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, no, I've always been. I built a small company in that time frame, 2000 to 2004, which was a media business, was very targeted towards the Indian community, and we were very keen, very very keen at that time to do something bigger online. But being focused on a smaller community at the time, we were not very successful.
Yeah,
But since it's been many years, I just thought this would be a very cool thing. Yes, a lot of it is
yeah,
hindsight. I get that.
yeah, yeah. I did. Um, Later, towards 2007, 8, there were some online communities that come up where you could customize them, kind of like your own personalized. And so I took the networking community because obviously what I was doing was not scalable at all, right? Um, I mean, there's very few people that have been able to scale person-to-person networking groups. BNI obviously is one and probably the foremost, but it wasn't. My model wasn't scalable. So I did try in 2007, and I came up with a membership model online with members and had people from Chicago and outside the DC area. But then the 2009 crash happened, and it really didn't get too far.
Hmm, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
You're up, Chuck.
All right. So Dan, first off, I can relate a lot to what you say, just not to quite the extreme. For me, I've done probably the biggest event I've done's been a full Ironman, but 2015, I'm an accountant, CPA right now, doing taxes now, and after tax season went in 2015, saw my doctor. got my physical, and a week later came back sick. And he had the lab results back, and then told me basically, not in addition to having high blood pressure and high cholesterol and everything else, that I had diabetes.
Mm.
And that freaked me out. And so I was really, really careful about anything I ate for the first 2 weeks. And I remember having a bowl of oatmeal with blueberries and maybe some almond milk, and measured my glucose 2 hours later, and it was still hanging up high. And I was so mad, I jumped on the bike, and even though it was like 2 weeks after, being sick and everything, I was kind of like, I'm like, forget this. I'm going to jump on the bike and go for a 45-minute ride. Came back, and the glucose levels went down. And I was like, wait a minute, I got control. I got some control here. And long story short, got my weight down to 155 from 192, not 193, in about 6 months. Running wise, I could do a 7-minute mile for 10 miles. And I was blown away. Well, let's fast forward to this year, to like last Monday. That's why this is very timely. Monday, I go like, something seems wrong here. And I tested my glucose level, and it was like 220, 227. And I was like, oh, crap. Well, the weight's gained over the last 5 years slightly. And so I've been working on it this week. How have you been able to maintain it going forward after everything? Because it's so easy to kind of slip off and say, yeah, I'm in good shape now. I don't have to worry about some of these things.
Right. Now, congratulations on getting through and, now being uber sensitive about where you're at right now. So is your question in terms of are we talking pre-pandemic or during the pandemic, trying to stay in shape and fit?
That's a good point. I hadn't even thought of the pandemic side. I know that's contributed to it, but even pre-pandemic, just how have you kept yourself motivated and going, and not, say, cheating on diet, exercise, sleep?
Yep. So I got an answer for you, and it's my track team, my coach, my teammates. I talk about accountability a lot. And although I'd like to think that I'm self-motivated, the truth is that the voices will win over in the long run. And I've opened up and launched a YouTube channel on one fitness word per day. It's kind of a fitness challenge, but it's one word. And I don't teach how to get fit, no matter what your passion might be, but I talk about the principles. And one of those words is accountability. And what I talk about is that there are times, many times, where I do not want to walk out that door, but I don't want to let my teammates down. And I talk about the fact that why is it ironic that it's easier to let myself down than it is my coach and teammates? I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. But I do know that not showing up and being accountable to them really was the greatest impetus to me to maintain. That's pre-pandemic. Now, we still are part of the team. We have our workouts. And now I've gotten to the point where, although the competitions are important and I love them and, thrive on them, I've gotten addicted to the feeling of working out and the endorphins, and as you know all too well, the dopamine, and just emotionally, I can really, I can really go down fast. And so it's really kind of allowed me to be on alert, not for the team or coach per se, although he's always asking how we doing, but just the pure benefit of being able to be fit and manage through this crisis that we're in. But it all started with the team and the accountability of my teammates. If you don't have a team, you know, you've got one right here, you know, not that you, maybe you've already done this. Let people know where, as you just, you know, authentically shared, where you're at and what you want to do. And I'm sure nobody's shy in this room. Tab will have the hammer down in terms of, hey, did you do this today or did you do that today? So the team doesn't have to be a traditional track team or whatever team it is. It just has to be a group of people that love and care about you.
So Dan, it's kind of interesting. You teed that up really nicely. One of the main objectives of the refineries group is the accountability and the accountability partners that we have. And one of the groups, we had our meeting today, and the discussion was really around, you know, everything that we do, all these meetings is about us improving our accountability to ourselves, but using each other as accountability partners so we can reach these objectives that we have. So yeah, that was timely. And that was not a plant. Anybody who thinks that was a plant, that was not a plant. So any other questions for Dan? We got probably, I don't know, I can't see without my glasses, 5 or 10 minutes.
I got a question for you, Dan. Before you had the episode that put you in the hospital, looking back, did you have any experiences that looking back, it was like, ooh, I should have listened to that symptom or whatnot? Like, what did that month before look like for you? I'm curious on that. Thank you for sharing your story, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. Gosh, looking back in 2012, I was back at the telecom world. I was leading at Verizon the inside sales team. So say no more about, you know, the pressures of sales and quotas. I lost my father in February of 2012. My best man and my best friend committed suicide in June. And this is only I'm kind of just piecing it back. I didn't really put it together at the time. I was, one of my daughters went through a very, very serious situation that that really was very frightening. And then you've got life happening and eating habits and not exercising and stress. So and I think there is a pattern that going back to 2000 with the .com bust and then having stent procedures in 2003. And then in 2012, in the beginning of that year, losing my dad. And obviously, you know, he died gracefully with the family around him. And, but it was a year of trauma, just trying to make sure that he was doing okay. So looking back, I can see there was a number of triggers just on the stress side alone that made it kind of well, of course you had a heart attack, you know? So, yeah. And so, but it's hard at the time to think about it. When you're in the middle of the whirlwind, it's really hard to kind of go, hey, I'm in the middle of the whirlwind. I need to slow down. It's only looking back that we get a better perspective. And fortunately, I'm able to look back and reflect on it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, anybody here? No? Okay. Well, Dan, thank you. This is phenomenal. And I speak for everybody by saying thank you for taking the time to talk about this. I love hearing the stories, love hearing about how you just overcame all the challenges and committed yourself to, you know, your health and track and committed yourself to taking 50 years to go through a 4-year degree. You know, I Hey, nobody is outside of my poking fun at. But no, in all seriousness, that is phenomenal, and that is, in my opinion, much better than doing it in four. That is a level of commitment that is admirable. And so, thank you for sharing that. And
Welcome.
I appreciate that. And everybody, thank you, and have a great rest of your Friday.
Hey,
Thank
Tab, one
Yeah.
last, do we have a hand up? No? Yes, or that was bye.
you.
But I did
don't know, yeah.
I did want to give a shout out to Tab and how this started. And I think it's a lesson for all of us. So I've been on LinkedIn since 2003, back to the, early days of the networking community, and saw an article called Networking Without the Wine and Cheese. And it was all about LinkedIn. So I jumped on board. So, and Tab's probably not that far behind me. And he reached out to me and said, I see that we've been on LinkedIn for a while. Let's have a conversation. Now, I can attest, I have, I've got all the connections, you just look at the, the LinkedIn profile. It's like, oh my goodness, like this guy's got it, but it means nothing if we don't engage. It is there as an asset. And Tab proved to me that you got to pick up the phone, reach out, make a personal message if you want to connect with somebody. And I was, and that was a first. I mean, other people have reached out, but most people are selling stuff, right? We reached out for a different reason. So I just want to leave that thought and thank Tab and your networking group. And I learned a lot from just that one action of Tab being proactive and not wanting anything other than just to connect.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. And I led in with the, hey, we've been connected for 16 years. I know we've been taking the relationship slowly. Maybe we should have a conversation. I think I said something like that. So again,
Yeah.
thank you, Dan, and much appreciated. And we're not going to lose contact for sure.
Okay. Stay safe to your new heart
Thank
for
you.
life.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.